the things that God has given to us. There's a story about this football team. Football was the only sport that I ever was any good at. We didn't have basketball. We didn't even have a gym in the high school that I was in grade 9 and 10, and didn't ever get going much in basketball. And when I was growing up on the farm, there was way too much work to do and too poor for skates, and hockey's an expensive thing. And so I did skate a little bit and play some old-timer hockey that I enjoyed, but never did really play. But football, you just got to be a little short on brains in your head and a little extra strong, and you can do that. So I played football some. But this football team was having a game, and it was the home game, and they were getting beat pretty good. And people began shouting advice from the crowd, as usual. And so the guy that they thought might rescue the loss, his name was Leroy. And they kept shouting, "Give Leroy the ball." And they didn't give Leroy the ball, and they lost again. And next time they had the ball, "Give Leroy the ball." Finally, after a few times of that, the quarterback turned around and yelled to the crowd, "Leroy don't want the ball." And sometimes that's the way that things are in church when we're talking about gifts and talents and things that we should be doing and sharing. People sometimes say, "That's just not my gift." I don't know how many times that I've heard people say, "Oh, I know it needs to be done, but that's not my gift." And sometimes maybe that's accurate, and sometimes maybe it's not accurate. One of those times is in Exodus chapter 4. You might want to follow along, and I'll read for you the first few verses of Exodus chapter 4. God is talking to Moses. Moses has, chapter 3, they've been through the burning bush and everything, and so Moses is making the answers in chapter 4. Moses answered, "What if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, 'The Lord did not appear to you'?" Then the Lord said to him, "What is that in your hand?" "A staff," he replied. The Lord said, "Throw it on the ground." Moses threw it on the ground, and it became a snake, and he ran from it. Then the Lord said to him, "Reach out your hand and take it by the tail." I would only do that if I had gotten a verbal message also. So Moses reached out and took hold of the snake, and it turned back into a staff in his hand. Then "This," said the Lord, "is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you." Then the Lord said, "Put your hand inside your cloak." So Moses put his hand into his cloak, and when he took it out, it was leprous like snow. "Now put it back into your cloak," he said. So Moses put his hand back into his cloak, and when he took it out, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. Then the Lord said, "If they do not believe you or pay attention to the first miraculous sign, they may believe the second. But if they do not believe these two signs or listen to you, take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground. The water you take from the river will become blood on the ground." Now you would think, we reason, if we had signs like that, 3 of them, you would think you'd feel pretty confident, right? Not so. Moses said to the Lord, "O Lord, I have never been eloquent. It's not my gift. Neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant, I am slow of speech and tongue." The Lord said to him, here's what I want you to catch in verse 11. "Who gave man his mouth? Who makes him deaf or mute? Who gives him sight or makes him blind? Is it not I, the Lord?" I want you to think about that for a minute. Read that again with me. Who makes him deaf or mute? God makes some people deaf and mute. We think that's not fair, right? Who makes him have sight or makes him blind? We think that's not fair. God makes them all. Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you speak and teach you what to say. But Moses said, Oh, Lord, please send someone else to do it. Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he said, What about your brother Aaron the Levite? I know he can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you, and his heart will be glad when he sees you. You shall speak to him and put words in his mouth. I will help both of you speak and will teach you what to do. He will speak to the people for you, and it will be as if he were your mouth, as if you were God to him. But take this staff in your hands so you can perform miraculous signs with it. So Moses and Aaron are going to head back to Egypt and take on Pharaoh. And I want to encourage you to think about the process of who's going to do what, and each of them have their gifts. I don't know if you've read much Moses' history, Exodus. My belief is Moses, next to Jesus, is by far the most fantastic leader in the Bible in history ever. To move that many people through the desert, I don't know if you tried to take a youth group on a trip, take 20 of them somewhere. That's a complicated process. It's not easy moving people on a trip. You take those Israelites from Egypt back to Canaan, all of the things that Moses faces is just phenomenal. But he thinks that he can't really do it. He needs Aaron. So Aaron goes along to do his part. And as you think about gifts, and as you think about what God wants you to be doing, it's not an easy kind of process. It's not easy for Moses to figure out exactly. He's got a history. He's got all kinds of things that have happened. And this isn't going to be an easy thing for him. So just by way of review from last week, we talked about the importance of being stewards. Talked about time. Sometimes country music gets a little blast, but there's a wonderful song that doesn't have any sex, doesn't have anything in it like that. Kenny Chesney sings about Don't Blink. I turned on the evening news, saw an old man being interviewed, turned 102 today. Asked him what the secret to life. He looked up from his old pipe, laughed and said, All I can say is, don't blink. Just like that, you're 6 years old and you take a nap and you wake up and you're 25 and your high school sweetheart becomes your wife. Don't blink, you might just miss your babies growing like mine did, turning into mums and dads. Next thing you know, your better half of 50 years is there in bed and you're praying God takes you instead. Trust me, friend, 100 years goes faster than you think, so don't blink. I was glued to my TV when it looked like he looked at me and said, best start putting first things first, because when your hourglass turns out of sand, you can't flip it up and start over again. Take every breath God gives you for what it's worth. And then he repeats the process of you growing up again. And about you, but I love that song because it reminded me every time of the importance of time. And I hope that we managed to get a bit of that across to you last week about the importance of you managing your time. God gives all of us time. But he also gives us talents or gifts. And then he gives us money, possessions, things that we have, not ours, as we said last week. Get rid of that word my. I was visiting with some people this week, and I said, no, you got to get rid of that word my. They're not yours. They're God's. We are just stewards of them. We're just the managers. Try to get that firm in your head. So maybe it's useful to review 4 what I call principles of stewardship for you. As you think about stewardship, there's some things that maybe are helpful for you to kind of be the basis of both time, talent, and treasure. 4 principles of stewardship. First principle of ownership. Psalms 24, verse 1, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, for he founded it on the seas and established it on the waters." In the beginning, Adam is told to care for the garden. God owns everything, and we are simply the managers. If you don't start from that basis, then nothing else makes sense, and everything's out of gear, and values will be all off all the way down the line unless you recognize you do not own it. You are the manager. God owns everything. And if you are a Christian, then God owns everything that you have. Deuteronomy 8, verse 18, Moses is telling the Israelites, getting them ready to go into the land of Canaan, and he reminds them, "Remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth." Think about that. It's not because you're so smart. It's not because work so hard. It's not any of those things. It is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth, and so confirms his covenant, which he swore to your ancestors as it is today. Second principle, the principle of responsibility. Owners have rights. You do not have rights. Stewards, managers like us, we have responsibilities. That's very different than rights. Please get rid of that word rights if you're a Christian. Jesus had no rights, and you have no rights. If you're a Christian, rights are gone. It all belongs to God. That's a huge step. I don't know if you're all moving with me or not. That's a big, big jump from rights to no rights. Sometimes people say, it's my. No, it's not. You belong to God. Everything you have belongs to God. You have responsibilities. 1 Corinthians 4:2. "Now it is required that those who have been given a trust must prove faithful." You're responsible. Third principle of accountability. Stewards are accountable. The parable we read last week, the king is coming back. God is in charge, and he expects us to produce fruit. God has entrusted authority to us. Genesis 2:15, "The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it," not to own it, to work it and take care of it. It's God's garden. We will give an account to the rightful owner of how we manage the garden, whatever your garden is. Luke 16:11 and 12. "So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? All you have is you, and I'm sorry, but you don't even have you." 1 Corinthians 6:19 and 20, "You are not your own. You were bought with a price. Therefore, honor God with your body." You don't even belong to you. Isn't that scary? Can't we even just hang on to me? Okay, take the car, take the house, take all this stuff. But no, if you're a Christian, you have been bought with a price, and you don't even belong to you. That is a very, very, very different way of looking at things. And that's why becoming a Christian, Jesus says, count the cost. This is a big deal. This is a huge, huge jump. This isn't just going to church on Sunday and giving a little money and taking communion. This is a huge, huge jump, different way to look at things. Maybe you didn't just count that out carefully before you jumped. Maybe you need to go back and think about that again and recommit. Maybe you have. Maybe everything, you're all good. This is all boring and old, and you've already got this under control, and this is useless. But I just have a feeling maybe not. Number 4, the principle of reward. Colossians 3:23 and 24. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. There is going to be a reward. We can count on that. So the work that you do, the way you use your talents, the way you use your time, the way you use your treasure, there's going to be a reward for that. Count on it. Promise. Simon was talking about the promise this morning. Faithful servants can expect to be rewarded in this life and the next. Not that you're going to be rich. We're not talking about wealth and health gospel here. That is totally not accurate. Whatever you've heard or believe about that, sorry, it's not Bible. That's not the route, but you can count on to be rewarded. There are rewards for you in this life and next. The sweetest words are going to be, when we get there, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. That's what we're after, isn't it? That's what we want to have. That's what we want to hear when we get there. We don't want to hear any other stuff. Sorry, I don't know you and all those kind of stuff, do we? We want to be owned by him and everything we have owned by him. 1 Peter 4:10, none. In using our talents, there are several passages. Mainly there are 4 passages, and they're fairly easy for you to remember. Let me help you. There are 4 passages that talk about gifts, and you might want to go home and read those this afternoon. Romans 12, 1 Corinthians 12, Ephesians 4, and 1 Peter 4. And those 4 passages will go through gifts that God has given to people. Whether he's given them to you or not, that may or may not be, but he has dished those out. 1 Peter 4:10, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. 1 Timothy 4:14, do not neglect your gift, Paul says to Timothy, which was given you through prophecy when the body of elders laid their hands on you. Romans 12:6-8, we have different gifts according to the grace given to us, each of us. If your gift is prophesying, then prophesy in accordance with your faith. If it is serving, then serve. If it is teaching, then teach. If it is to encourage, then give encouragement. If it is giving, then give generously. If it is to lead, do it diligently. If it is to show mercy, do it cheerfully. I want to encourage you that there's a lot of gifts there that sometimes we expect everybody to do, but they're not everybody's gift. We might do them somewhat, but people who have gifts in those areas are to really give her. Everybody's not made to be a teacher. I've seen some people who tried to teach in school. I've seen some people who tried to teach and preach in church. I thought, not your gift, sorry. And you have too. But sometimes we expect everybody to be the very same at everything. So all Christians have to be at the same spot at the same time doing the same things. And that's just not true. There are gifts that people have. You're supposed to use your gift and specialize in that. So I want to encourage you with that. That, of course, is not nearly a complete list. There's gifts of hospitality. There's gifts of prayer. There's gifts of all kinds of things. There's a couple of problems with them. One is that, unfortunately, people think the public work, wonderful worship leading people up here, and helpless preacher trying to preach, those are the real things. I'd love to do that. Why is it that we think the public things are the things that we should all be trying to do? or that everybody should be expected to do. There are bunches of gifts that we are to go about with hospitality, with prayer, with service, all kinds of things that we can do quietly, but those aren't near so much fun, are they? I just heard recently that in your brain, there is a chemical released when you're talking that is akin to the chemicals that get released when you're on drugs or alcohol or smoking that makes you feel good. And that sometimes people get so addicted to that feel-good feeling from talking that then they just love to talk, because it's like being addicted to drugs or something. You just get addicted to talking. I have a wonderful granddaughter. But when she was little like that, she just talked all the time. And my son said to her one day, said, "Sienna, do you just love to hear yourself talk?" She was about 3. She said, "As a matter of fact, I do." I thought, I know some people like that. We just, but think about all of the things that there are to do that aren't public. Try to be a little more recognition and honoring to people that are doing the not so public things, and maybe they will be a little more attractive. 2 Timothy 1 verse 6. "For this reason I remind you to fan into flame the gift of God, which is in you through the laying out of my hands." Proverbs 18:16. "A gift opens the way and ushers the giver into the presence of the great." And so as you think about all of that and the importance of that, maybe here's some suggestions that might help you as you try to think about your gift. And let me encourage you to think in terms of not trying to be like everybody else or not trying to have the gift that other people have. I have a very dear friend at home in our town. My wife and I have known him since we first got married 51 years ago. I had heard about people like this before, but I didn't think they really existed. He does not have a single family connection. His father died alcoholic a long time ago, and his mother died about 5 years ago. He cared for his mother in her last 10, 15 years. I had the honor of preaching his mother's funeral because we've tried to be super good to him. He was married once. That didn't work. His wife has managed to turn his daughter and grandchildren against him and told him, "Don't call, don't text, don't come see us." Nothing. He has absolutely zero family connections. So we've kind of taken him in. So a while back, we were going fishing up north, and we were taking him along. I try to take him on lots of stuff like that. And during the trip, then we got to talking about life and serious things and his life. And he burst into tears and he said, "I just can't keep up everything that I try to do like other people." And he's single, but he tries to cook like a wife would, and he tries to have a house like a family would, and he tries to have everything that everybody else would have. And he burst into these tears and he said, it's like a race that I'm in, and we start the race and everybody's way ahead of me. I suggested to him, "How be you decide you're not going to race?" I decided that a while back. I was in that rat race too. I decided a while back I'm not going to race because there's lots of people I can't keep up with too. And so I want to encourage you, don't race. Don't try to be like other people. Don't try to have the gifts that other people have. Don't try to sing like Colleen. You can't do it. You'll just discourage yourself. But there's stuff you can do. And so I want to encourage you to think about, how do you decide? How do you identify? How do you figure out then what you can do or should be doing? So here's maybe some suggestions for you. And it's not black and white, and it's not easy, and it might even change as things go along. I think I told you a while back, I used to speak at a lot of youth rallies. Haven't been invited to do that for a long, long time. Life changes as you go along, and you got different things that you can do. But try to think of, how do I figure out what's the best way? Because lots of people have spent their life in not the best way, and they come to the end and they have lots of regrets. Let me encourage you to try to reduce the regrets. So here's some possibilities for you. What are some things you like? If you like doing stuff, that may be one indication. Maybe not, but it might be one indication. What are some things that you are good at? You can kind of tell some things that you're good at. Unfortunately, most of us don't really have a good picture of ourselves. So you might need to ask others, what things do others in the body think you are good at? That might give you some hints. If people are complimenting you or honoring you with stuff, maybe that tells you some areas that you're good at. Have you searched? Have you given it a try? It's like eating vegetables, broccoli. Have you really tried it? Okay? So have you tried singing? Have you tried speaking? Have you tried sweeping the floor? Have you tried visiting at the hospital? Have you tried whatever kind of service, public or private or whatever? Have you tried it, and does it work pretty good? If you haven't tried it, then you can't really say you don't have that gift, right? So give it a try, and then maybe it won't go so good. You're not real good at that. When I was 8 years old, I was in the hospital getting my tonsils out. And I got infection in them somehow from, obviously, the hospital's fault. I should have sued them, but we didn't do that in those days. But I had to stay. My brother was there getting his out too. About 3 days he got out and went home, and I had to stay there by myself at 8 years old. And I couldn't swallow anything, and I couldn't eat, and couldn't do anything. My throat was just terrible. And I can still remember I was 8 years old, and somebody came in and told me a story about this person who had had their tonsils out, and then they grew back again, and they had to go back in the hospital and have them out again. And I decided right then, I ain't going to do this again. Whatever, I'll be sick instead of doing this. But I thought, what a stupid thing to say to an 8-year-old boy in the hospital with his tonsils. Maybe some people just can't seem to say the right thing at the right time. That's not your gift. If you land up doing that to people, don't go to the hospital anymore, okay? But give it a try. Don't decide you can't do hospital visitation until you've tried it. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Have you prayed about it? I mean, seriously prayed about it. I have a friend whose wife got cancer, and he says, John, I've always prayed. That was back when we were 50-some years old and we were going to lunch. He said, I've always prayed, but in the last year, with my wife with cancer, I've learned to pray fervently. I encourage you to pray fervently about gifts. What are you good at? Has God presented you with opportunities? If God is presenting you with opportunities for stuff, that may be a hint that God is leading you in that direction. And have you tried some kind of gift assessment? I do have a kind of a test survey. I hate to call it a test, that scares you, it's like school. But it's a little thing that you fill out. If you want to do that, I can get that for you. The church in Mooseman where I was last, the young adult group did a service to the whole church, and there was several nights that people could come and do a gift analysis thing, and it was really good. I went and did it one night. There's aids like that that can help you with what might be your gift. So there's lots of ways for you to try to think through that, but here's some summary for you. Number one, God has given them. Number two, your job is to search and find and use. And number three, choosing nothing is not a godly or biblical option. There's not an option to do nothing. Don't say God hasn't given you any. In the story of the talents, they all had at least one. One had 5 and one had 10. Don't get excited about being the one. Don't feel bad. Try to get away from, don't race. Don't try to keep up with the 10 guy. That's just God chose, and he's done different with them than he has with you. And then to review why we have these, why we are stewards. We are stewards so we can be an ambassador. We're stewards so we can bring glory to God, and so we can rejoice always, like we talked about last week. I want to encourage you to really think about gifts and what it is that God has given you and how you do those, and not say, man, the church has just got to have this so nobody else is doing it, so I got to do it. Try to think about you and your life and what are you really good at? What has God gifted you with? And that's what you're the steward of. So the gifts that God has given you. That's my encouragement for you. With changing our schedule last week, then we've landed up with an extra Sunday, and I actually have some more things that I'll share with you in 2 weeks about gifts and talents, because this is, money's complicated, but it's kind of more exact math. Time is complicated too, but it's kind of exact math too. It's in hours and minutes. But gifts are a lot more fuzzy. And so in 2 weeks, we'll talk some more about gifts, and then we'll kind of be back on schedule. I hope that you're doing some serious thinking about stewardship, how you handle things, how you handle time, talent, and treasure as we go through this month. That's my encouragement for you this morning. We'll have our song of response.